Hello. So thanks for presenting to the EcoMap Club, the Louisiana Against False Solutions coastal permit tracker. What is there a name for this?
We've been calling it the carbon waste injection permit tracking dashboard. Or the
Thank
permit
you.
tracker, either
That
or.
is the correct name, the carbon waste injection permit tracker.
Awesome. Well, I can share, I just have like a couple brief slides and then I'll hand it over to Shannon for the demo. Can we all see my screen? Great. So yes, we are January advisors. We're a data science consulting firm based out of Houston, and we do a lot of data dashboard building and data analysis work. So for some quick context, we've already done intros. So this dashboard came to life because Louisiana Against False Solutions and Cynthia and Scott and Eloise and so many other wonderful people that I cannot list all at once right now contracted with us to kind of improve the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources permit tracking database. So as it is now, DNR oversees permitting for coastal projects, including those related to carbon waste injection. And just the user interface of this database often like buries important permits that you might want to track or keep an eye on, just due to the volume of permits that come through the system and the features of the system itself. It's not super searchable. There's no mapping. This is it on the right here. So you can see it's a little bit clunky and outdated. So we worked together to pull out important details from these permits, map them as best as we could, and add a lot of social context and social layers to these proposed projects. And you'll see our version of this when I pass it over to Shannon. So, and if you have questions or anything, feel free to interrupt me. Shannon can keep an eye on the chat as well. Where did we get the data is a question we get. So this is a quick overview of all of our data sources that you'll see on the dashboard. So all the permit information comes from DNR, that permit tracking database that I showed you on the previous slide. We wrote a scraper to pull that. Pipeline and pipeline facility data. So that's things like storage facilities, distribution centers, all of that comes from MapSearch, which was purchased for us. And we also have some custom data layers that Scott at Healthy Gulf made for us about proposed carbon waste injection projects. And then later you'll see the block group level data on vulnerable populations that might be affected by these projects. And we have some community and care center locations that come from the Department of Homeland Infrastructure. They have a big data portal of things like nursing homes, hospitals, fire stations, churches, things that you might want to know when you're evaluating the impact of a project. And then finally, we included Indigenous territory land acknowledgements as best as we could. We used nativeland.ca. Native Land's a big website. We used their API to map Indigenous territories and acknowledge the land as best as we could. Any questions on any of these data sources or the permit tracking system that we pulled from? Great. I will hand it over to Shannon now to walk us through the tool and give a better demo.
For the link in the chat to kind of is that a beta or is that like the live? Is that where it's going to live?
That is the live site. And pretty much 99% finished right now. Well, also this is something we can talk about at our meeting, Scott, but like if we wanted to host it somewhere else or make it live somewhere on y'all's website, we can definitely do that. But this link is the live site that will get you there. So y'all can follow along, or I will also walk through all of the features. So you can follow along on your own, or I'll walk through the features here as I share screen. So first on the landing page, we've just got some welcome text, and then also an email subscription box. So if you add your email address and name here, then you'll get an email update every time we update the data that goes into this website. So every time new permits, coastal use permits are scraped from the DNR platform and added to the site. And the meat of the dashboard is going to lie here on the map page. So it opens up with a blank map of South Louisiana. And then on the left here are all of these toggles for different data layers that Divya talked about that we collected that you can turn on and off one at a time or all together, multiple at a time. So first thing is the permits. So these are coastal use permits related to carbon waste injection projects. First shows all of them. You can hover over the permits to see the CUP number or the P number, and then click on a permit for some more information, who applied for that permit and when the permit was submitted. And there's also this view profile button where you can see a lot more information about the permit, and we'll go to that later after we step through all the map, but that will take you to a new page. These permits too, you can filter a couple ways, either by like a keyword search, which will search across multiple fields associated with these permits. So you could search for, say, Exxon, and it'll show you just permits submitted by Exxon. Or you can also filter with this drop down for applicant names. So this will have a finite list of all of the applicants for these permits that you can select from to look at. So a couple different ways to filter the data here to look at permits of interest. And you can also download the data for this permit. So this will include for every permit in the current map view, so either the whole set of them, or if you filtered it down for a particular type or a particular applicant, then just those. It'll include the permit numbers and dates and the commodities, all sorts of, all of the information that we have from the DNR database associated with those permits. Next layer is proposed carbon waste injection projects. So this is the layer custom made by Scott Eustace from Healthy Gulf. And it includes a couple different types of pipelines and wells that you can look at all together or filter to just look at a particular type of new proposed carbon waste injection projects. We've also got existing pipelines. I'm going to zoom in here because there's a lot of data in this layer. And this is going to show all of the current existing petrochemical pipelines in the area. And again, for most of these layers, you can hover or click on it to get more information about that particular pipeline or project or permit. And here we've got the pipelines are color-coded based on the commodity that they carry, and the thickness of the pipeline corresponds to the diameter, or the thickness of the line corresponds to the diameter of the pipeline. Again, here you can filter to look at just certain type, like maybe just look at ones that carry carbon dioxide, or only look at Exxon permits or pipelines and see that filtered view. Similarly, we have pipeline facilities. So these are going to be infrastructure associated with pipelines, and these yellow dots, infrastructure associated with pipelines that aren't the actual pipelines. So storage facilities and plants and things like this. And again, have some more information if you hover or click over those facilities. And the rest of these layers are related to the communities around and the social context of these areas. So we've got community centers, including like hospitals and schools and places of worship, that you can look at to see which of these community centers are going to be impacted by projects. We've got vulnerable populations. So these are environmental justice communities defined by the census at the block group level. So this will tell you in a certain area if there are a high proportion of Native Americans, non-white people, and or areas with poorer people. And then have native lands data, which will show where different indigenous groups live in the area. So like Divya said, this is collected from Native Land Digital, and you can click through to this link to get more information about these different indigenous groups and see where they are. We've got the map defaulted to show just a few groups of interest, but there's a lot of different indigenous groups that you can add here too. And then the last one here is legislative boundaries. So if for particular, let's say, permits of interest, you can see which state representatives districts these permits lie in, and who would be a contact for advocacy there. And here we've got a couple different types of boundaries, Louisiana House and Senate districts and US congressional districts that you can look at. Alrighty, so that's it on the map. Any questions about what we've gone through so far, these different data layers you want to look closer at or have questions about? Alrighty, let's move on to the last page, is the profile page, where you can really get a closer look at a particular permit and the community surrounding it. So selecting any permit here, you'll see first, this is information from the DNR platform, information that we have about this permitted project, and a map to show where it is, and as well as the different environmental justice communities in that area. Let's select one that's in a more urban area now. And then down here we have a few tables. So this first one shows every census block group that intersects within a 6-mile radius of this permit. So it'll list every block group and then state whether this is a Native American census area, an area with predominantly non-white people, or a poor area. And these criteria go toward designated whether or not this permit has a disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities. And that will also be printed up here. So if a permit poses a disproportionate environmental impact, that means that at least half of the block groups that intersect a radius of this permit have one of these environmental justice communities. And then we've also here got a list of the community care centers within a 6-mile radius of the permit, and a list of the proposed carbon waste injection within a 6-mile radius. So that's a demo of the site. I'll keep sharing screen in case there are any questions or anything that we want to take a closer look at. Yeah, please let me know.
Thank you. So we've got the general scope of the site and the different layers, the big map that you can click around on, and hopefully people are clicking around on it, zooming in and out and seeing. And then if you select drill in on a permit, like I use a keyword Exxon or search for filter permits by the applicant name Exxon, and define Exxon. I think there's a few different versions of Exxon, right, in the permit database, and maybe zoom into a couple of the communities where Exxon is going. You can find that permit and look at it. And then, yeah, a wealth of information on the permit page, including operationalizing that block group data, which is something that we developed, with Justin, who dropped off. But
Here.
oh, there you are. The Army Corps, especially when they look at environmental justice, especially for pipelines, they look at this block group to parish reference. So we've kind of made a map out of that. an attempt to simplify that. But I think it also helps us just explore who's next to these permits and how might we want to talk with them as a coalition. Round for questions. And I'll go into an example of that.
I'll also drop our emails in the chat. So if you want to bookmark this and take a look at it and try it out for yourself later and something comes up, feel free to email me or Shannon and we can look into it too.
This looks really great, y'all. Such great work. I hadn't seen the latest version with the legislative boundaries, and that's really, really awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Awesome, thanks. Sure thing. I think that's definitely a useful feature.
I had a quick question. Sorry for being late. Courtney Bernhardt with the Environmental Integrity Project here. On the permits layer, I've been clicking through and separately, it's kind of hard to tell from the descriptions, and I think this is just an artifact of the CUP database, but it's kind of hard to tell which ones are carbon related and which ones aren't. Are there any best practices that you'd like, search terms that you'd recommend using in order to kind of suss through all of those, or just to kind of lean on what you know about the company? I don't know if you could offer any tips there.
Yes, it is quite tricky. There is no like single identifying keyword in the database as is that indicates whether or not something is a carbon waste project. So the way that we've been trying to at least filter and identify ones are just using the keyword search to look for things like carbon or CO2 or class 2, class 6, things like that. And so if it might be helpful, perhaps something we can put on the next phase of the project is like suggesting keywords related to carbon waste injection that might help with filtering the permits going forward. But yeah, as best as we could, we filtered out truly extraneous things in terms of narrowing down to exactly which ones are carbon waste related. It's a little bit, like you already said, it's tricky to know.
Yeah, you have to kind
a lot of the time, the permit might not have any of those keywords in it, but it could be like a geological excavation or a you know, like an environmental assessment in order to later look at something that might be related to carbon waste injection. So we definitely left a lot in.
Yeah.
And if you have any
perhaps there's a way, like in the visualization, to at least maybe color code the ones that you definitively know are connected with carbon.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That might be one way to go about it, and just to let other folks, like, just so you know, like, hey, the green ones or the red ones or whatever are carbon related, and then everything else might be ? So I don't know. This is very cool and super useful. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. And we'll add that to the list of potential edits and updates as we go into the next phase of the project.
I think that's come up before, and it came up last time. There's so many permits. Carbon waste injection is not the only thing I work on, so the fact that I could search this for LNG is also good. Not necessarily a drawdown. There is a typology that the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources Office of Coastal Management has. It has about 12 different categories, but the department is very inconsistent in putting which project type. They don't put it in their data. So although the guidelines, the department is using a certain typology to weigh costs and benefits of issuing a permit, and mostly they issue the permits. That it's been a struggle to get that classification because they don't necessarily put it in an easy readable format. But Justin, I see you have your hand up.
Hey, yeah, I do have a question. If we could, so my understanding is, I guess you're saying that the work I did on the environmental justice community, or sorry, census block group is work is feeding into this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, can we look at that? Because I actually am confused about that information. If you kind of go into some of the, like if you click on a permit in St. James or St. John, you zoom in. Okay, this is a bigger view, but we could work with this. If you could zoom, just like zoom into an area. I guess I'm confused because maybe it's a set of transparencies, but it seems like there's more colors on the map than are in the legend.
Yeah, so I think you are saying that overlapping between multiple types of groups. So this one, for instance, is overlapping between the green and the red. So this is, the best way we could think to show multiple overlapping groups. But if that's confusing, you could look at one of these layers at a time.
So I guess I was like in the permit, I was actually clicked on a specific permit point where I don't necessarily have those filters available. So it became more confusing there. It's a small window. Like if you go back to the permit view.
Gotcha, on this view.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way to filter out the information that way. And I was also actually concerned because if you click, that's like an area we know really well. This is the 4th and 5th district in St. James. That kind of chocolate colored polygon right there, if you click on that, it says non-white areas, no. And I'm just like, that doesn't seem right to me. So I wasn't sure how the filtering was going on in the information.
Yeah, we can take another look at that and make sure the data is mapping correctly. And it's useful to have, like, you've mentioned something that you know from ground truth to be not quite right. So we'll use that to check and make
Yeah, and
sure.
then I kind of scanned over to New Orleans, and the demographics there also seemed to kind of what didn't seem to map my sense of what the reality is. So I just wasn't sure how the data mapping, if there was maybe a problem with how that translated into the map. But generally, I mean, I think it's awesome that you guys are using the information. I just have a concern about it being accurate, and then also having the legend being matching the number of colors in presentation in how you're showing it.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for flagging that. We will definitely take a closer look there.
Yeah, and I cleaned and uploaded a lot of the data for this, so I'll pull these permits in particular and look at what the numbers are, and I might reach out to you if you're open to get another check
that's
and see.
fine. Yeah, because I don't know, maybe it's, I mean, I know that in the recoding of the data, there's a lot of times it was like 0 and 1, 0 and 1. Sometimes it gets confusing. So it's like how.
Yeah.
So.
And I do think it's pulling from the zeros and the ones. So I wonder if it's just something's getting missed. So yeah, I'll follow up with you on this specific, on the first part of the query, which was related to the why it's saying no.
Do you have my contact info? You can get it.
I was going to if you could send me your email, that would be great.
All right, I'm just going to put it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing that up.
I think something that maps as expected is that so much of Louisiana is an environmental justice area of concern in one way or another. Sometimes we get pushback from that, but that's how the CEQ's map of disadvantaged communities the CEJST. That's how that one has worked out as well. And so this one breaks it out into non-white and poorer, which are kind of your traditional environmental justice block groups. I think the work that we did with Justin also identifies Native American areas, which is helpful. It's been helpful for me to identify places like the Coshada Reservation, even though we have that land back map, that historic extent of the Coshada populace. Those things are different, right? So, you know, I think as a coalition, we see those Native American areas as environmental justice areas, even though it's been very discretionary, you know, discretionary whether or not agencies see Native American areas themselves in the census data as environmental justice areas, as opposed to you know, the way the federal agencies dealing with federally recognized tribes. A lot of our issues in Louisiana, that a lot of our Native folks are not federally recognized, and some in the path of these projects don't want federal recognition. But a lot of the same dynamics, you know, this tool has been very useful for organizing, just figuring out who is where and how to talk to them. It still applies, or it's very useful. I think I was demoing these layers. Let's see if I can bring it up and maybe, you know, trying to think about how to organize and who we need to talk to. I was looking at the EnLink project that goes from St. James, where we're focused on right now, to Vermilion Parish, and it went through the town of Franklin. And I wasn't thinking about the small African American community in this parish, but it turns out a lot of the locals who wanted the information on carbon waste injection were African American, and they were organizing. They've taken what information we've been able to give them, and they've been organizing on those lines. So I think the map really helped me understand where they were, as opposed to the Chitimacha folks down the road. And so now we're kind of using that. In addition, when we were in Broussard, and I was displaying that view of the proposed EnLink pipeline, the town of Franklin, and the community care centers, I just so happened to have a church highlighted on the big map. And it turns out one of the audience members' grandmothers attended that church. So, you know, I think already we've been using this as a pretty functional organizing tool to just figure out and communicate with residents about what the heck is going on.
I have another question.
Yes, please.
Sorry. So I know that other groups could potentially use the layers that you're building into this in other platforms, like we have Oil and Gas Watch, for instance. Might be helpful to reference them. I was wondering if you had any plans to, I guess, provide open access to some of the layers so that people could download them and put them someplace else, or use them in other analyses.
Yeah,
Maybe this is a scope question.
I think from our end, that's definitely something we can do. I think it would be kind of a question for the last team of if that's something I want to do, if that's kind of fair use of the data that you've collected, and yeah, just if and how and which layers that you would want to be able to be downloadable. But it's definitely something easy for us to add to the platform.
Which layer specifically, just out of my curiosity, are you thinking of, Courtney?
Oh, they're all great. The permit one is particularly useful for oil and gas watch. Same with carbon waste injection. Maybe even, you've got community care. So these are all really good context layers for Louisiana. So it's just helpful to be able to port it over into, a report if someone's writing it, or to and even outside of oil and gas watch, especially outside of oil and gas watch. I think that when people are just trying to organize around it, it helps to have easier access to the data, even though a screenshot is also pretty powerful. It's helpful to be able to do other things with it.
Yeah, I think just maybe responding for the coalition, although Matt and Cynthia can jump in. I think, yeah, we're all about sharing everything. I've been curating the proposed layer. Oh, sorry, is that what we're calling? Yeah. And where, oil and gas watch usually, as a coalition, we're having to plan and organize and fundraise before the permits come, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So usually when the permits come, I'm going to be emailing Courtney and Louisa and putting those same pipeline shape files up on oil and gas watch. But we've just had this flood of plantation sales, new ammonia plants, and EPA Region 6 announcements. So we're just trying to, I have a more rudimentary Google map. I think the one thing that cannot be shared is the existing pipelines and existing pipeline facilities GIS data, because that's actually a company called Map Search we've contracted with to display it. So you can take a screen cap and we can make images all day from it, but I think because it's a universal problem of there's so many pipelines in Louisiana, and the data for them is usually very bad. All the government data for them is very bad. This Map Search data, I have some stories about where it's also very bad. But it is the best. This is the best. Well, you can go to the Department of Transportation pipeline hazardous material public mapper, but it only gives you, I guess that is the best, but it only gives you one parish at a time. So it's not very useful for an interface like this. So I do think the Map Search data, which is a private entity, but they pretty much digitize that government database and allow us to make a statewide map of pipelines. I'm telling people about this map, and over and over and over again, it's like, oh, you have a pipeline map, of the existing pipelines. Oh man, I'd love to see it. I'm being asked for that by people who have lived in Plaquemines Parish their whole lives. They've never seen, an easily digestible, accurate, interactive map of the existing pipelines. So yeah, it's been valuable.
And just quickly to point out, and Justin, I saw you have a question. The permit data is downloadable, so you can grab a CSV of
those, and
they have the latitude, the coordinates attached to them. So that might
be
helpful.
Awesome.
But yeah, the rest of them definitely can link out to where I got them, or we can look into making it downloadable. Justin, I saw you had another question.
Yeah, thanks. So this is this is again, I guess, regarding the vulnerable populations toggle that you can turn on there. If you're going to scroll down, I mean, it's what we're looking at right now. I was just wondering if it seems like for some of the other classes of information, you provide at least a little blurb about kind of giving some metadata about what this information entails. And I was thinking that, I mean, because I worked on it, that maybe the vulnerable populations could also benefit from that, because, you know, at least in terms of how this information I was arrived at, specifically you know, there might be some questions about, well, how are you like identifying Native American areas? What does that mean? Well, how are you identifying what poorer areas are? There is a fair amount of analysis that went into it, you know, and specifically it's related to a comparison at from the block group to the parish level. So it's kind of a relative measure. And I don't think that really, maybe I understand from interface, you want things simple and clean, but I also think that if you're providing that level of information on some of the other stuff, that maybe you could add in some context that would help, because the legislative boundaries doesn't include parishes. And I guess I was also thinking that that might be a good add, was to, that way if you added in parishes at the legislative boundaries level, you could then register at least what's the comparison geography and how did these get arrived at, you know?
Yeah, those are great points. We can definitely add an explainer for what these vulnerable populations are, and maybe link out a brief explainer and maybe link out to something more detailed. And yeah, great idea to add parishes to the legislative boundaries. We can do that as well.
And since I have your contact, Scott has some notes that he provided to us on the layer that y'all built or that you built. So perhaps I can use some language from that and then circle back with you on whether you think things are phrased appropriately, not to take up too much of your time, but just to make sure that things are being reflected accurately.
And the other note is I think that the non-white areas actually does show up, at least according to what my sense of it, if you click that under vulnerable populations. So if you were to kind of change that to non-white, for instance, you'll see that the areas in like St. James that we were looking at show up as non-white. If you kind of scan over, you have to kind of go over to that area where we were previously, but that's like, it's like a good comparison geography because I feel like I know it so well, and the environmental justice is really black and white there, you know? So I think that maybe the layers showing correctly is just how it was classified in that one dialog box, you know?
Okay, great. That's really good to know. Yeah, and we'll dig deeper into that and compare it against as how they're displayed here, which seems to be correct as far as you can tell.
Cool. Yeah, this congressional district layer is interesting too. It is a little wonky, but if we had the parishes to compare it against, you can really see some of the gerrymandering that's been at issue in these court cases in federal court in Louisiana about, you know, the need to draw new congressional districts. Some of that jumps out just with the US congressional districts layer that you can look at. But especially when you compare it to the parishes, you can see like how they drew this weird line over that one block group in Laplace that's an African American area. The parishes would be useful. Well, Alana or Preet, do you have any reactions or any questions to the tracker? Anything like as I think a lot of us have seen this before, but I don't think you have anything that comes to mind.
I don't have any real questions, but I'm glad that this is a resource. I feel like a lot of us on these calls have been using these kind of piecemeal ways of getting this data. So having it all in one place is really awesome. And I appreciate y'all doing it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I
Big
don't have any questions either, but yeah, it's really interesting. I've been looking through it. Some really great information all collected here.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, as someone, I didn't even know this was happening, so I'm excited to see the work get utilized and published, so.
I think I probably told you it was happening a year ago. This is that thing. Remember? Remember a year ago? All right. Well, I think we've had a good discussion. We've gotten into some data and looked at some good maps. I just want to thank Shannon and Divya so much for presenting their tracker to our club. With that, we can end early, and I'll be sending around the playlist with the new music suggestions. Look out, get some good headphones on. All right, y'all. Have a good day.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thank you.